Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, I'm talking with Pastor Joseph Wolyniak. He's a really close friend of mine. And we're talking about the Narthex Project, which is something that we're both working on together. You'll hear more in the conversation, but it's about digital ministry and connecting with those who are spiritual but not religious, and all the things we're learning as we go through this project. It skews in a bunch of other directions, but it's a really awesome conversation just about storytelling and why it matters to show up as people of faith in the places where we can. It's just great. I can't wait to share it with you. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good.
Well, I'm here with my very best friend in the whole wide world, Joseph Wolyniak. How are you, Joe?
Nate, great to see you, man.
Great to see you as always. Joe is an Episcopal priest at Christ Church, Denver, but you live in Seattle, and we're going to get into how this all works out, etc. Joe is the mastermind, and are you executive director of the Narthex Project? Is that your technical term?
No, the guru.
The guru of the Narthex Project, which is this Lilly grant that Joe wrote and received. I'm going to let you talk more details. But just for the Bethany people here, Bethany is one of the sub-grantees that was kind of a part of this. So we want to talk about the Narthex grant today. Joe, give us, just start at the beginning, kind of talk about how this is structured, how it works, just to give our listener an understanding of what we're talking about.
First of all, I thought we were talking about how the Nuggets didn't make too many trades at the trade deadline.
They didn't do anything at the trade deadline.
I thought we were going to be talking about the buyout market. Okay. I'll suddenly pivot.
How to fix the NBA All-Star game.
Yes. I guess that's our next conversation. So the Narthex, developing digital capacity for the analog church. I have to say that we may have written the grant and received the funds, but we were very, very much inspired by you, Nate, and what you all are doing at Bethany, and just trying to keep up with the Lutheran Joneses down the street. But if we take a step back and go to the pandemic, the joke that I like to say is that Episcopalians discovered the internet in the pandemic, even if it was the AOL dial-up version. That there's, of course, many, many dark things and difficult things of the pandemic. But if necessity is the mother of invention, your church, my church, many mainline churches had to pivot into online engagement overnight in the pandemic. I'll never forget us having to live stream our first service, the first service we ever live streamed at Christ Church Denver with my mobile phone, even if it looked like the Blair Witch Project and all the shaky craziness. And quickly pivoting up from there to online live streaming and Zoom Bible studies. And I was really worried for our congregation that we weren't going to be able to make that pivot to online engagement. Mm-hmm. Our church, like many mainline churches, is full of folks that are over the age of 55 and may have varying levels of technological ability. But we were able to make this pivot as a congregation and start connecting as a community, doing Bible studies, worship, prayer online. And this gave us an opportunity to say, how could we continue to do this, learn from other peers, including you, Bethany Lutheran, and other mainline leaders in different congregations across the country, and ask how to do this better as we try to engage folks beyond the walls of our church.
So with that then, in terms of writing up the grant itself, thank you for that, gives us a real understanding of sort of the impetus behind it. And I think you're right that a ton of congregations were all of a sudden looking at themselves in March 2020 being like, what do we do now? Side note, if you look back at our YouTube channel from those days, we were recording and live streaming, but we had these security cameras that we were using. So it looks like a 1995 home video, and I love it. And I'm so grateful for the people that gave money so that we could improve the quality of our live stream.
Amen.
It's really funny. But with this, developing digital capacity, I'm also remembering, and I know you and I have talked, that part of this is not just about helping the mainline denominations get up to code, but more also how can we be reaching out and connecting with an audience that's not here, correct? Like that's kind of part of how the grant was written.
That's exactly right. It's built into the name itself. I mean, so for those of your listeners who don't speak Greek, the narthex itself is a Greek architectural term for traditional churches. There would be this space between the street and the sanctuary, sort of a transition place as you're walking into the church or as you're walking out from the church. And we meant it in that bi-directional idea that this is sort of a gathering space and a place of encounter for those of us who inhabit the church and those who are on the outside of the church. What we would, in the Pew language, call the ever-growing ranks of the nuns, duns, and spiritual, but not religious. Again, your listeners, I'm sure, know of their friends and family that are in any of those categories that would consider themselves not religious, or they perhaps were religious at some point and have disaffiliated, walked away from institutional or organized Christianity or religion generally, and maybe in that category of still having a spirituality or a sense of God, or some transcendent being or beings, but not identifying with the traditional religious institutions. So the whole goal of this project is not just to do the in-reach stuff, which we did really well in the pandemic, but how can we push ourselves in that evangelical mission that is a part of our baptism and a part of the Great Commission, to go and share the good news and the highways and the hedges, as the old hymn goes.
I want to dig into this, Joe, because you and I have talked about all of these themes in various ways, but I'm also kind of curious. We're 2 years in now. Just about, right? To this whole project. And Christ Church Denver was the one that received the grant. And then there's 5 sub-grantees. Do I have that correct? Trying digital ministry in various mainline ways. And here's what I'm wondering about and would love your knee-jerk reaction to. And I haven't asked you this before because we're too busy talking about the nuggets. But do you think that digital space is where the church can connect with the nuns and the duns and the spiritual but not religious? Is that actually I don't know, like what analogy we want to use, but like a good space for that? Or is it too gnarly over there for the church to make any headway?
I'm going to put the question back to you, but
Okay.
I'm going to start with teaching in a classroom at Seattle University. So you mentioned that I live in Seattle, and I'm still a remote member of the pastoral staff at Christ Church Denver. But having lived in Seattle now, I started teaching as an affiliate faculty at our local Jesuit Catholic school, within which 98% of the students that I've had to date, so about 150 students, 98% of them are in that nun, dun, spiritual but not religious, atheistic, agnostic category. And they know, for me, shockingly little about Christianity, even though they're attending a Jesuit Catholic school. I had a student the other day write on a midterm that they didn't know that Jesus wasn't an American. And that took me aback. But if I were honest, there's a part of me that said, if I went to your average parishioner at Bethany Lutheran and I said, quick, when and where was Siddhartha Gautama, the first Buddha, born? They probably wouldn't be able to say, oh, in the 6th or 7th century BC in Lumbini, Nepal, right?
I'm really glad you didn't ask me that question.
Right.
Yeah, great.
Back to the Nuggets buyout market. But we are inhabiting an ever increasingly post-Christian context, or in certain parts of the country, like here in the Pacific Northwest, it was never really a religious context. So, but I think the hunger for spirituality or for transcendence is there in all of us. And the place that most of us, especially younger digital natives, go to find the answers to the questions we're asking in life, from everything, how do we change something mechanical in our car to how we raise our kids to what is the meaning and purpose of life is online. So I don't know that there is a quick and easy correlation between some of the content that you have been posting and the amazing reels and the podcasts to young people all of a sudden showing up in our church.
Right.
But I do think that this is a space that we are going to have to occupy if we want any chance for people discovering us. Another one of our colleagues in this pilot cohort of churches, the way that he put it, an AME Zion pastor in Philadelphia said, we're kind of a yellow pages church in a digital age. So how do we as the church inhabit this digital space? But can I put the question back to you? I mean, you've been experimenting and we've been trying to learn from you at Bethany Lutheran through your podcasting, through the online content that you all have been creating. What have you found in terms of this ability to reach those you're trying to reach beyond the walls of your church?
No, and so I'll give you my honest kind of reflection of all of it too, is it's not yet, like you said, I don't think directly resulting in a huge surge in membership or even worship attendance.
Nope.
And you rooted all of this in our baptismal covenant in that we're called to share the good news. And it doesn't ever say anywhere in there that, and there should be results. And so that's also part of how I've been constantly approaching this. Like, I am going to continually put out pieces of information, like resources and prayers and Bible verses and et cetera, in hopes that the person scrolling through might stop and finally hear something that speaks to their soul in a meaningful way. And that's hard some days for that to be enough, because we are programmed to be so results oriented. But my call has always been about being faithful, not being successful. And I have to remind myself of that again and again. The other piece too, though, I think part of my hesitation and worry is that this can easily also become just trying to play the secular game with Christian pieces. And that's something I'm very averse to as well, that like, I don't want to do gimmicks and I don't want to do like just trying to play along with whatever is hot and exciting right now, in an effort to like bait and switch someone and be like, oh shoot, like I stumbled upon Christianity. And that's a really fine line. I don't know if you have, I know you have a reaction to that. But like, how do you discern that kind of fine line between like, are we just sort of like trying to entertain people, which shouldn't be what we're doing, or are we actually doing evangelistic gospel work? How do you discern that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy for me because I am constitutionally incapable of doing anything hot or exciting, as you know. So
as evidenced by your hat.
So yeah, I'm not going to struggle with that, but it is a really good question. I mean, I think that always the form forms, right? So we have to be thinking about how, as we try to inhabit these online spaces, we talked about social media in particular, that the very form of social media itself is forming us as we try to inhabit those spaces. Right. Both in terms of what we're doing as content creators for the platforms themselves, and the kinds of content that we're putting out there and consuming. And so go back to your word of faithfulness. That is the challenge for us: is how do we faithfully inhabit those spaces? And to the question of numbers and success versus faithfulness. That is always the question for us as Christians. I mean, I want to be prudent with our use of these technologies. I don't want to be doing this if nobody's engaging these resources. But I do, of course, think of Jesus himself, who was able to go person to person, and the grand strategy for the new inbreaking kingdom was 12 small faithful followers, and starting with them and sending them out to proclaim the good news. We're talking pastor to pastor here, but I'm really aware that the call of good news is not just for us. And we're trying to talk about how can our churches inhabit these online spaces as institutions. But the bigger challenge for us may be to help the everyday person in our pews think about inhabiting their own social media presence or their own online platforms to share truly good news, the good news of Jesus and not just the good news of Rome, because our social media feeds are completely dominated by bad news, number one. And if I go back to those students in the classroom, what they tell me that they see about Christianity is not particularly good to them. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us, not just pastors, not just churches as institutions, but all of us as followers of Jesus, to be thinking about the ways in which we inhabit ourselves online. And are we sharing the good news you were just talking about? And is it the good news of Jesus, or is it the good news, the evangelion of Rome?
It's really funny. I don't know if you ever saw this trend, but there was a whole trend about a year ago on social media where you would just ask a random person, like, when's the last time you thought about the Roman Empire? And for whatever reason, it was that like men think about the Roman Empire way more than women. And yet, yeah, like that was my answer because I had our social media person at the time asked me that question. I'm like probably about every 6 weeks, like it seems like it comes up in my preaching or something. Anyways, I just think that's funny. But it's a good example of, yeah, like can we be 11 in the online space? Just by showing up, just by putting something out there that's more positive. And even deeper than that, right? Like, because that's the other thing. I don't want to just get into positive pop psychology. Like, I really believe the gospel is something so much more important and transformational than that hopefully people are starting to discover. And here's my question I'll put back to you. Do you ever wonder, could that time be spent better just getting a small group of people together like Jesus did and really pouring into them in those ways?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
I would say that the whole impetus behind this project, and I know that you share this, and I'd love to hear you reflect on this too, is that online is not a means. It is a means. It's not an end to itself, right?
Yeah.
We're not simply trying to create an online church or online community. Those things can be great. There's a space for online community, especially for those who maybe in particular life circumstances, or they're homebound or hospital bound or something like that, where they really need online community. But for the vast majority of folks, the real place of encounter is always going to be incarnational. It's like with real people offline. But the vast majority of people, again, if we're talking about the institutional church, their first experience of a church is not going to be suddenly showing up at Bethany Lutheran at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. First, they're going to scroll. They're going to check out the website. They're going to ask questions. They may even DM or email the congregation they're going to kind of kick the tires of the church before they ever show up on Sunday morning. Listen to your sermon. They're going to see how you present yourself online. So the whole goal is for the institutional church to think about being thoughtful about how we're presenting ourselves online in ways that are invitational to those who don't know what the word Lutheran or Episcopalian mean, or may ever increasingly not know what the word Christian means. But again, to put it in the broader register for all of us to be thinking about the ways in which we inhabit ourselves online. We'll be quick to say, oh, you all have to go see this amazing film that just came out. You've got to go check out this new restaurant that is in Cherry Creek. It's just absolutely amazing. But are we as quick to talk about the amazing things that are happening in our church or in our own hearts or lives or families? We get really shy about faith. We'll be really quick to talk about politics. But are we as ready to share the good news of Jesus Christ?
No, there's just something so awkward about it for most people. And yet, I think the digital space can make it so much more easy and manageable One of the things that I've been wanting to do is to create a class, just like an after church class for my people at Bethany about digital evangelism and digital tithing, so to speak, because you really can do that. And it's really easy. Like people don't realize it, but like when you click like on the post, that tells the algorithm that more people should see this. Like that alone is really helpful. That is a gift to your church. And what's even bigger gift is when you click that share button, because that also like makes the algorithm sparkle and light up. And it means that now everyone on your feed gets to see this thing that you've shared. And so there's like just there's a whole ethos that we're missing out on. There's a whole way of being in an online space that would be so beneficial to your congregation that I don't think people normally consider or think about. And part of that, part of that too is just sort of the current state of the online spaces. I feel like maybe 15 years ago, it was a lot safer to just be like, oh, hey, but now most people just sort of lurk online, except for the folks that get really angry in the comments. And I'm rambling, but you like just touched on something that I've been wanting to do, but not found time for. Because I do think I really like this vision of teaching, like through engaging in digital ministry, we're also discipling people in the congregation about how to inhabit those spaces. Mm-hmm. Fair? Okay. Well, so what have you learned through this process, like being a part of this grant at Christ Church? Are there any insights or big aha moments that you've kind of had in the last 2 years as a result of this project?
Oh man, how many hours do we have? So I would say for us as a congregation, one of the things was taking a long, hard look in the mirror, which is not always fun. One of the things for us was to realize almost all of our communications was, prior to starting this grant, internal. We were just talking to ourselves. Everything in the email, everything on our website was just talking to ourselves about ourselves, when the next event is going to come up, what resources we have. This gave us an opportunity to really step back and as you know, in our process, sort of imagine who might we be trying to reach in our neighborhood that is not currently a part of our church. And we kind of playfully called this the 80210 initiative. As I told you, I do nothing hot, hip, or exciting. This is a back to the 90s reference, although your 90s Bethany Saved by the Bell video set the standard.
Thank
for
you.
90s
I'm so glad you saw it. Very important.
So, you know, this question of like, how can we try to build the church for those who don't exist yet, and build an online space for those who are not currently a part of our church. And this has just continued to challenge me personally to think about those nones and dones and why are they not in church?
Yeah.
And I could come up with a very long list of things that I've heard. People that have been hurt, people who are bored, people who have felt unseen, people who feel like they can't really reconcile some of the arcane stuff we do in these religious traditions with their real everyday lives. It's a very long list, but how can we, in the spirit of Jesus's own teaching, to leave the 99 to go find the one? Maybe it's a little bit flipped now. It's kind of like leaving the 10 to go find the 99,000, given the decline of the mainline church. But how can we invert our usual gravitational pull, which is always toward the gathered church, and back out to being the scattered church in our everyday lives? But I'm curious for you too. I mean, not to keep tooting your horn, but you've been a point of inspiration for me, both personally and pastorally, and your congregation has done this a lot. What have y'all learned along the way?
I mean, I think a lot of us, I've sort of confessed to it just through the questions I'm asking, is that there was definitely a mindset of if you post it, they will come. Yeah. And just kind of reframing that for everyone. And it speaks so much to the human soul's predicament of always believing we found the quick fix. and there is no quick fix. There's just Jesus. Like that's that's the most important thing that I continually learn. Um, but also, I mean, within that, just learning. I mean, I've learned a lot about what works online and what doesn't, and just in terms of the importance of storytelling. And you mentioned the silly 1990s staff video that we did, and yet that was really it really speaks to like, hey, like let's show other people that we don't take ourselves too seriously. And if you look on our website, that's the kind of the way we frame it on our staff pages. It says like we do really serious work, but we don't take ourselves too seriously, and that's important because it really is true about who we are. And it's something we want other people to know about us because they have the mindset of the church being, especially a Lutheran church, right? Like old and stodgy and set in their ways and very, European, sitting in rows and Robert's Rules of Order, whatever have you. And we want to show that there's more to us than that, because that's also what we think makes us great. Like storytelling is so, so important in the digital space, but also just as a church community. Who are you? And be proud of that and be willing to tell other people about it. That's the quick one that comes to mind in terms of a key learning. I guess I'll leave it at that for now. But it's what I want to say to that too. It's a key learning, and it is so neat to see that is such a part of what it means to be a faith community, and it always has been. I love to think about one of Jesus's like core characteristics or identities is as a storyteller. And I don't think we talk about that a lot. Like I would never limit it to that, but that he spoke in parables. And what is that like? What is that trying to show us about how to be a human being? And what is that showing us about the character of God? That when God was in human form, God told stories. And how can we, as the gathered community of Christ, tell the stories of this place? And I see all these connections. Like this is what we do at baptism. It's like we're going to bless the water, but we're going to bless the water by telling you and recounting all the stories of the time that God used water to save God's people. And it's like, hey, look, the story is still happening today with this baby, right? Like it's so beautiful when you start to unpack it. And that's just, I mean, maybe that's the key learning too, is that there's nothing new. It seems new and fresh and creative, and it is so deeply rooted in who we are and what we're trying to do. I don't know. Please, reactions to any of that, because you always have an opinion about everything, which is why I like you. But where do you resonate with storytelling? Did I commit any grave heresies with that whole rant?
No, absolutely not. You didn't, no heresies, and absolutely resonate with this storytelling piece, which I want to come back to for, again, our average person in the pews. That this isn't just like our institutional church organizational communications plan, but maybe we should think about this, your everyday baptized person, that, evangelism is hard. Like none of us took an apologetics or evangelism 101 class, right? And we feel like we don't want to talk about religion and politics because those are the two no-go zones. Although we do seem to be willing to talk a lot about politics online, just not religion. But our real fear around religion is that, if we get into that and somebody asks us a question, am I going to be positioned to answer that? I don't know. Now I got to back away. But maybe storytelling is the place to begin for all of us, that you don't have to come up with the argument that's going to bring somebody into faith. In fact, it's not actually an argument. It's just about telling stories of where you've encountered God in your life, or the story of the difference faith has made to you in this topsy-turvy, noisy, turbulent world. That going back to your own story and what difference Jesus has made in your life. If I can circle back to one of the stories that Jesus himself told, of the parable of the sower, and this idea of the one-to-one correspondence. That if I post a reel, if I post something online, then it's going to lead to somebody coming to faith and starting worshiping with us in the church. Jesus told this story of the sower goes out and throws the seed, and it's really this story of profligate grace. It is not a very precise or measured way of planting seeds. And I know nothing about seed planting because I come from Detroit. But this is not precise and measured out. And if I plant the seed and water it just under the right conditions, but it is just throwing stuff out there to see what happens. And sometimes the seed falls on hard soil. Sometimes a bird comes in and just distracts before the seed can really take root. And other times it does take root. And that's been the way that I am trying to think about all of this digital storytelling, digital gospel sharing work. Is it is just trying to cast stuff out there and see what might land with people. And maybe it doesn't lead to a one-to-one correspondence that this reel means this person started worshiping with us, but maybe that's also not the point. It is to just share profligate grace, story of God's work in the world. And maybe that is a word of encouragement to people in a world that desperately needs hope.
I think about one of my best friend growing up. He was going through a really hard time, and I didn't really know how to help him. So I'm like, hey, like, I just pray when things are hard, and that's all I told him. And it started this whole new thread of conversation with us. And like then he slept over every Saturday night, like for the rest of those 2 years before we went off to college, so that we could all go to church together. And he's still like very, very much a person of faith today. And it was just because I was willing enough and I trusted him enough. Like we had a good enough friendship where I could just be like, listen, like, I'm just going to tell you what works for me. But I hear that exactly in what you're saying. Like sometimes that's all that it really takes. Do you have a story though from your own life about why this matters for you? I mean, I know you have many, but I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to maybe tell us one.
Yeah, I've heard, again, tons of younger people. I'm gonna go back to the classroom.
Okay.
And I start my class at Seattle University every quarter asking students what their image of Jesus is and where they've gotten it from. And what emerges is an American Jesus that is muscular, violent, mean, exclusionary, so on and so forth. And I ask, where'd you pick up that image? And all of them will say social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter,
Wow.
100%.
Wow.
That I don't really know anything about Christianity, but if I did have an impression of who Jesus was or what he taught or what his followers look like as they try to walk in his footsteps, this is what I've seen online. So this is, in my mind, what we're up against. It is as much a deconstructing task as it is a reconstructing task. First of all, there's an aspect of this where we have to say, this is not what Jesus is or was or ever taught. But can I reintroduce you to the Jesus that I know? This embodiment of God's love, mercy, and grace in the world. I've also heard counter stories of people saying, you know what did change my mind? This little piece of content where I saw everyday people faithfully following the teachings of Jesus and trying to put them into practice in their lives. And while I might not be convinced or I'm not going to become a Christian tomorrow, I did see this and it made me think maybe there are people out there who are trying to live out their faith in ways that do resonate with me. So then again, I think for the everyday person in your pews or in my pews that live busy lives, work 9-to-5 jobs, raising kids, what can they do to share the hope that is within them, as the New Testament says?
Mm-hmm.
How about for you? Is there a story that sticks out to you in your own personal life or your pastoral ministry?
About sharing the hope that is within me. I really like that you drew us to that line in particular. I mean, yeah, that's really good. So what I'll say, just in terms of why this stuff all matters, is just because it has always been so poignant for my own being, like my study of theology, and just the more I dig into it, the more the pieces just seem to fit together, and not all the time. I'm currently so attuned to looking at people and being able to kind of recognize the trauma that informs their current state of being.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's so prevalent, and not in like some mystical sense, but I can just kind of tell. It's like, oh wow, like you are so in need of attention right now, because I bet like growing up, nobody paid you any attention, or you were the kid that was bullied, or like I've just developed this whole new aspect of compassion for kind of seeing people's stories, or seeing the story that might live behind the current super annoying way folks present.
Mhm.
And that makes me care so much about trying to help be a part of the healing of humanity in these like deep soul level ways, which is what the gospel is so much about for me. Is that right, like we're all in this messy human predicament, and we have these stories from our life about why things got messed up and why we ended up going through the world in a certain way, but it comes from this place of woundedness. I know people like to hate on the story of original sin, but I see that too, of just like the way, like there's something beautiful about that story, saying like, yeah, every single person has this woundedness within them that they're just trying to figure out. And for us to have a system of faith that is deeply connected to these incredible depths of the human experience is just something I really want other people to know about, because I think it matters, and I think it's important, and I think it really could help. And I know, I mean, I know it from my own life. Yeah, I've been able to, because of my faith, like help put different pieces in their correct spot, more or less. And I know, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I like this is part of why we connect so much, is because I know you have similar experiences and a similar level of passion for the gospel and what it does to an individual.
Amen. You know, again, to bring this back to the classroom, this is something that we've talked a lot about with the undergraduate students, that
Okay.
especially in this social media age, it is so easy to hate, because what we experience online are often flattened caricatures. They're avatars of ourselves.
I mean, and it's a series of zeros and ones. Like, let's
That's
say
right.
what it is. That's what
Yeah.
digital anything is. Is it 0101, switch on, switch off? Yeah.
The whole design is to keep us on these devices as long as we possibly can. And what's a great way to do it? By stoking that anger emotion, right? And if you're
Right.
angry, then you're going to stay online, stay engaged. And so hatred and anger are great ways for social media companies to monetize your presence and mine online. And I'll talk to the students about the radical message of Jesus. And Howard Thurman, who was a sort of the spiritual guide behind the civil rights movement, wrote a really important book called Jesus and the Disinherited in 1949, in the pre-civil rights era, Jim Crow South, amid segregation, and talked about hatred being so natural and easy for us, helpful to an extent, because hatred allows us to distinguish ourselves from others online, to say, well, I hate this thing, I'm not that. It helps us to identify, to do identity formation. But he says it can become a problem, and it can just seep into every aspect of our being. And that so often those hatreds are rooted in the very hurts that you're talking about.
Mhm.
And herein lies the hope of the gospel, as the teaching of Jesus, to learn to love your enemies. That none of us, Thurman says, and getting this from Jesus himself, is reducible to the worst thing that we've said or done. And to see every person as a child of God, created in God's image and likeness. And we'll talk with students, they say they hate this. They hate this teaching. This is a really hard teaching. And I will admit I am a lifelong practitioner who is still in process.
Yeah.
Hatred is still very easy for me, but how can we learn to see people as more than the worst parts of themselves that they present online or in the real world? To see those hurts and pains that we all carry, those original sins or wounds that all of us have, and to see the gospel as a meeting place where we can be a part of the ministry of reconciliation that we've been given.
What I love about you bringing up, what got me so excited too, the other piece to the love your enemy aspect is that it forces you to also have to confront the enemy within. Because, right, like so oftentimes, the person that annoys you the most is the one who's doing the things that you know you do, but never want to admit to. Right? Like, but that's why it annoys you.
Did you talk to my wife before this?
But that's why it annoys you so much, is because, but you never, like, it's very hard to put that piece together. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't stand that person, until you like zoom out and you're like, oh my gosh, like they are maybe just like this terrible part of myself turned up to 11. And that's why it unsettles us so much, is because like this is the subconscious part of ourselves that we're just trying to push away and ignore and wish away that it wasn't there. But if you have to love your enemy, it creates this incredible space too, where you now have to face down the demon inside that you've been trying to ignore and say isn't there, because you're going to love the person who presents that so strongly, and inherently you're learning to love yourself more deeply as well at the same time. Which is, I love that you brought that up. I didn't know the whole Howard Thurman aspect of it, but it is part of, I think, the brilliance of the gospel message. Because lots of people say, like, yeah, love your neighbor, love others, treat others the way you want to be treated. But love your enemy is so distinctly radical. And we just kind of brush it off because we know Jesus said it. And it's like, it's a nice little soundbite. But if you like sit with that and meditate on it and really think about the implications, it is still to this day so unsettling and groundbreaking and crazy.
This is the genius of Jesus. And not only is it an idea, but it was a practice for him. That if we look at his 12 disciples, among the 12 disciples are Simon the Zealot and Matthew the tax collector. Matthew the tax collector, who shook down his own Jewish people to collect money and then lined his own pockets to give taxes to the occupying force, the Roman Empire. And Simon the Zealot, you could also translate that Simon the Patriot, who wanted to, by any means necessary, overthrow the Roman Empire, including violence. They tried. And Jesus selects both of these diametrically opposed individuals and asks them to be a part of this new human family, this new kingdom that he is building, that is inbreaking with his presence. So to bring it back to online, part of it may not be posting the meme that's going to bring somebody to faith.
Well, I have some good ones though.
I know you do. It is thinking about how we inhabit ourselves in those places, how we engage with folks online when their views may be diametrically opposed to us, whether that is because they irk us and that they are whatever part of us that are turned up to 11, or if they are truly the embodiment of something that we just cannot wrap our minds around. How do we love our enemies in online conversation is an aspect of discipleship for our digital age.
Yeah, and it's a great place to kind of tie this all off too, because it shows that piece that you're talking about. Like, can we learn how to show up as people of faith in these online spaces? Not just seeing the other as the one who needs to be destroyed, and also not just looking for the content that will make me feel self-righteous and smug and right. But how can we show up in this as someone who will love their enemy in those spaces, as hard and difficult as that is? Cool. Anything to add before we sign off?
one more note on that front. I was listening to a pastor the other day, just to make this really practical. I was talking about his own involvement in some of the demonstrations in Minneapolis around the ICE activity there. And there's a quote that really stuck out to me, that the goal was not to march against, but to march towards. That to me is the gospel in the nutshell. Whether we're doing that in our offline everyday lives or in online spaces, that the goal here is not to march against somebody, but to march towards them with that ready defense of the hope that is within us, with the good news of the gospel of Jesus. And if that's all we accomplish in this Narthex project, maybe we will have done some good in the end.
Thanks for that. That's a perfect way to end it. Joe, thanks for taking the time. Love talking with you. You should move back to Denver. Have I said this? We could do this all the time. I miss you a lot. I love you and your family. Thanks for being a part of this. And you, dear listener, thanks for listening. Share this with family and friends who might need to hear it. As always, stay in peace.
Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.